Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I'm the actor.
My name's Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go.
All right. So, talking about Mid90s, which is an interesting first for multiple reasons. It's Jonah Hill's first, it's his directorial debut, I should say. And it's also the first time that he's written a movie by himself or is the sole contributor to the screenplay by himself. I think he's been credited on other movies for story and, helped with some scripts and stuff. But this is the first thing that's kind of like his own thing. So you just saw it today, you said.
I did.
And I saw it on October 16th. So it's been a little while for me, but it's still pretty fresh in my head. So I was able to go to like a Q&A screening of the movie where we watched the movie, and then it was at Alamo Drafthouse, and then afterwards they did a Q&A, which was it was Jonah Hill and somebody interviewing him, and then the cast. And it wasn't there were some decent questions, but it was just kind of okay, I guess. So that was the first time I was able to do a Q&A type thing, which was cool. The fact that I was able to see Jonah Hill live answering questions about the movie that we just watched, that was kind of cool. But ultimately I was able to get a lot more information about the movie and his process with the movie just by listening to podcasts and stuff after the fact. So how about you? What was your experience seeing this movie?
Well, I loved it, first of all, but he has 8 credits as a writer on IMDb, but the only one that says written by is Mid90s, which is the one we're talking about now. It says story by for the other ones, and he wrote something with Mariah Carey, or he wrote a segment called Andy's Dad for Saturday Night Live, and it says Jonah Hill / Mariah Carey. I don't know if they performed it together or wrote it together, but that's actually his first IMDb writer's credit. So he does have 8 considered as writing credits, but the rest of them say story by. So that answers that question. This is his first written by. You know what? I am a 90s guy. I was 18, 19 years old in the 90s, so I remember it quite vividly. So it was nice to see this time frame. I don't think the time frame overtook the film. I don't think it became about anything other than the story. It wasn't about, hey, look at the 90s. It was great. Look how cool everything looked. You can't really tell much about the time frame because a lot of the styles and things that were going on at the time, with the exceptions of skateboard shops, I don't think are as prominent now. I think they're, different types of shops for that kind of stuff, unless you're talking about Virginia Beach and, surfing and those kind of shops. So they weren't as prominent. They aren't as prominent now. So it was good to see the time frame. I like coming of age stories. I like stories where you're going to see something a little bit different that you're not normally seeing in a story. You don't often see young coming of age people, young adults, in this case, a kid. I guess he's 11, 12 years old. You don't often see coming of age stories about kids who are skateboarders who have difficult home lives. That said, I was worried about this film on a lot of different levels. I thought when I first saw the trailer, it was going to be like that movie Kids back in the 90s. Do you remember that film? That film disturbed me on so many levels. I mean, it's disturbing on so many levels. Just that shot in Kids of all those young African-American boys sitting on that big like chair couch thing, and they're all smoking a joint. And they're preschool looking. I mean, they're young looking. I would say they were even younger than this main character of Mid90s. So I was afraid it was going to be that type of film, when you very quickly learn it's not. So I was happy with this movie. I thought he did a good job. I thought he stood out of the way of it. There were a lot of things that I thought that he chose to do that I thought were great. And it reminded me of a really good short play, in the fact that in most plays that I've worked on or most plays that I've read, there are things that are in the script and or directors add to the plays that become motifs throughout the play that get revisited throughout the play. And it kind of gives a picture bookends, if you will. And I kept wondering, why is Lucas Hedges have orange juice all the time? Why does he have orange juice all the time? It stuck in my head, and I thought, and I should have known, oh, that's going to be a thing. And it was. And it was nice. It was pleasant how he chose to play that out. There were other things that add up later on in the storyline that you see here and there. And so I don't think he did anything wrong, Jonah Hill. I think it's a well-told story. It's not long at all, which is good nowadays. Sometimes these longer movies, like the one we talked about last week, Suspiria, is 2.5 hours long, and it was a long 2.5 hours, challenging 2.5 hours. So I wasn't mentally or emotionally prepared for anything other than what I got, and I was pleasantly surprised, and I liked the way that it played out. There were just so many things about it that added up for me, and I thought, yeah, this is well done. Is it anything to be blown out of the water about? I guess it depends on how you look at that. I'm blown out of the water that he was able to tell such a consistent story from beginning, middle to end, and it adds up and everything pays off, and it's just well told, and it still contains an amount of innocence to it that I think was a necessity. There's kindness in it. There's this generosity in it. These kids genuinely care about each other. I was not expecting that. I wasn't expecting that last shot in the hospital. I wasn't expecting that. I thought it was going to be something else. And when the lead character, and I've been trying to figure out if his name is
Sonny Sulchik.
Sulchik. Okay, I've heard a bunch of different pronunciations of it. I've even heard not pronouncing the J as Sulik, but he was in The Killing of a Sacred Deer, and I really like him. And I was concerned that this would just be do I fit in with this crowd story? I don't fit in at home. But Jonah Hill actually layers it with such strong texture. The whole hurting himself thing where he rubs the brush on his leg, or he does the choking where he chokes himself, self-mutilator, if you will. I wasn't expecting nuances like that. I wasn't expecting nuances about Lucas Hedges' character where, everything in his room is neat and complete and just in its place. There's a toothbrush next to each shoe that he cleans the shoe with. Each individual shoe or pair of shoes has a toothbrush. I wasn't expecting any of that. And so to get it, I was pleasantly surprised. I think he did well. I think this is something he should be proud of. And I liked it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really sure what to expect going into it, and for me, especially on the technical side, you see the beginning of the movie, and it starts off, A24 is the production company that bought it and is releasing it. So and so you start off with the A24 in the skateboards in the shape of A24. I thought that was cool, and it was in 4x3. And then the beginning scene of him getting of Sonny Sulchik's character getting beat up by Lucas Hedges' character, his brother, was also in 4x3. And it got to a certain point where I realized that this movie was going to be in that same aspect ratio the whole way through. And I thought that's a really bold choice, especially nowadays. That usually you would use differing aspect ratios for emphasis. Steph and I just started watching this show, Homecoming, with Julia Roberts on Amazon Prime, and they do that. They change aspect ratios to differentiate between like something that happens in the past versus something that happens present day. And so that's usually how you see aspect ratios used nowadays. But in this movie, it was intentional to use that 4x3 aspect ratio and also to use 16 millimeter film because they're kind of hearkening back to the skater videos of the 90s, I guess, late 80s, early 90s, and then throughout the 90s of guys carrying around video cameras, and in this one they even have a whole character, fourth grade, I guess is his name, yeah, so who's that's his character, that's his role, and that's how he fits into the group. But it's a simple story. You can definitely say it is a coming of age story, but ultimately it's just a story about family, and it's a story about a child searching for a family that has not been provided to him. And so he figures out a way to, well, first of all, he sees what he wants in the interaction of the group of skaters. He sees those skaters, interconnected together as a family, and he wants to be a part of that. And also, they're willing to accept him, maybe with certain caveats, but yes, they're willing to accept him. Maybe he's got to go fill up their water jug or something, to pay his dues at some point. But ultimately he's looking for something that he's lacking at home, because of his family situation, with his mother and his brother and his lack of a father, I'm guessing. So he's kind of searching for that, for some sort of a cohesive family, and he's able to find that. And I thought that was really cool. And the way that we're introduced to those characters, like that first discussion that they're having, it's a really kind of a base discussion, and it's a naive discussion, but it's also a genuine discussion. And I mean, and the language that they used, and you could tell that the things they're talking about are things that they're really interested in, and they feel like they're comfortable enough with each other to really ask those questions. And so I thought that was really cool. It's a really intimate scene, even though it's, for kids, talking about, whether black kids have to put on sunscreen, or, what you would do to your parents in weird scenarios. I mean, these are the things that, that kids can talk about. And so, Jonah Hill didn't shy away from that. It was effective in, number one, bringing that group together, at least showing you how close that group is. And then also opening up the eyes of the main character. Stevie is his name in the movie. So, and another thing I'll say about like the actors, quote unquote actors in this movie, Catherine Waterston, Lucas Hedges, is they use them just the right amount. I felt like they, they're big actors, especially compared to the other people in the movie, and they brought them in at the right times, and they gave those Jonah Hill gave those characters purpose, but he didn't lean on those actors. And there's a lot of acting going on. I think, at least for me, it felt like there was a lot of really genuine acting, and I don't know what you'd call it, but realism happening on screen, with the main kids in the movie, most of which haven't acted before, or have acted in very few projects. Like you said, Sonny Solchick was in Killing of a Sacred Deer, but he's more of a skater. From the interviews I've heard him on, he's more of a skater than an actor, and he's just kind of like gotten into certain roles, but not specifically trained actor, just kind of like an engaging person who sought out roles in movies, and he's got a great one in this one.
Yeah, I agree 100%. A couple of the other young men, they've been in a few things, but not much. So they are new to this process. And I think it's smart, because if you want an organic, genuine conversation between young guys in the 90s, then if you cast actors, you have the chance of it being pretentious to a degree. Because if I'm wondering how much was scripted versus how much was improv.
It was all scripted, and Jonah Hill brought the script to them, got everybody together, and was assuming that they would want to kind of like change it and modify it to be their own voices. But especially with that core group of skaters, they all stuck to the script, doggedly. And Jonah Hill, in the interviews that I've listened to him, has said he was kind of surprised with that, but ultimately it still felt genuine to me, at least watching it. It felt like what they were saying was genuine for themselves, for them to be saying that in those situations.
Yeah, and it sounded like that. And when they're having the conversation about would you to your mother or would you to your father, which is definitely not a PG conversation or even an R conversation. So we can't really have it explicit on the podcast. When they're having that conversation, young men at that point in their life have strange conversations about sexuality and explore strange things that they don't necessarily, not strange, but they explore different aspects of their sexuality in a way that the world is probably on a whole not aware of. And then when you grow up, you learn who you are and you move on. But there's a lot of exploration at that age. And I think he represented that in that conversation. The part about it that I liked the most, though, was, it's an odd question that they ask each other. It's just, there's not a winning answer to that question on any level. And I understand why the one guy chose dad instead of mom, but at the same time, it's just a weird question and a weird scenario. But at the end of that, fourth grade, the character fourth grade, and I believe his name is Ryder McLaughlin, he says at the end of that conversation, oh, let's talk about something else. I feel weird now. I feel funny in my tummy. And I love the honesty behind that because, of course, that's how he feels. Even though he brought it up and it seemed to be a genuine question that he was asking, he really wanted to know what people thought about it because he has obviously thought of this and what would he do if that, I guess they say live or die or death or life or, if you had to die or do this, what would you do? And it's, that's a group of friends type of question. It's definitely a stand by me type of question. Okay. But to actually allow that character, fourth grade, at the end of that scenario, to actually admit what his feelings were, I thought was really new for that kind of scene. Normally, young coming of age men bottle up their emotions. And obviously that's why Stevie, the lead character, is in search of a group of friends because he is bottling up things in his home life that he can't really express. And you learn later on via the orange juice scene that Lucas Hedges is really bottling up a lot of stuff too. When he has that outburst at the end of the film, he's been holding that in for a while. So to actually have a young kid, teenager, admit to their feelings, even though he brought the subject up, I thought it was nice. I thought it was unique, and you don't often see that. And there are little snippets all the way through the film where these young men are proven to be just good people. They're not just a bunch of kids who are hanging out looking to do bad things. They're young people coming of age who want to hang out and smoke weed and drink and fool around with girls and have a good time and skate. There's this stigma to that these people are often just not good people at heart. That's not true in this film. So to actually have a young man admit his feelings about something as quirky as that conversation, I thought was refreshing. I was like, yes, I like that because that's what the people in the audience are feeling. Mm-hmm. That's what somebody his age would be feeling. But to actually admit it, especially after the conversation when Stevie says thank you to the other little kid and the kid says, don't say that. That makes you look like, and it's a homophobic slur mm-hmm. that is used quite often in the film, mm-hmm. Enough to help me remember that the 90s really were like that. Mm-hmm. And they don't mean it necessarily as a bash on homosexuality. It's just, it's like they use the word retarded a lot too. Mm-hmm. And that has now taken on a different connotation in the world where it's not appropriate to really be using that. There are enough special needs people in this world that you should have an understanding that that word is really demeaning to them. So the same with the other word too, the homophobic slur. But that's how kids talked. And some of them still do to this day. So when Stevie is told you can't say thank you or you're this, I'm like, okay, that's typical. Mm-hmm. But then you see this other kid, fourth grade, his teenager, admit to his feelings. And then later on, you see Ray, he's the young African-American actor in it, Nikhil Smith, who I loved, mm-hmm. who I hope works a lot more. You see him say the same thing just in a different way and say, no, that's just common courtesy to be polite and say thank you. Like, you don't see young kids in coming-of-age movies about skaters who are not punks who would never admit to their feelings and never admit to being okay with being polite. You just don't. And if I had really put it together as they were talking, I would have realized that the scene at the end was important and was going to happen. But I didn't. And that's refreshing to me. This movie is not what you think it is. It is not the sum total of its parts. It is its individual parts making up the sum total, if you will. It becomes something other than what I was expecting. So for that, I liked it. I actually loved it. I thought it was really well done. So I'm happy for that.
It does a good job of giving the main character Stevie the, you know, kind of like the path to, I mean, we get to see a lot of his you know, benchmarks, a lot of the milestones in him learning to be an individual, because in the beginning of the movie you see him kind of like, you know, sneaking into his brother's room when his brother's not there and like writing down all of the CDs that his brother owns and like really kind of glomming on to his brother's tastes and the things that his brother has deemed, you know, worthy to be in his room. And he really does look up to his brother, like, you know, ultimately, like, he just wants to be his brother. But throughout the movie we start to you know, he starts to find out that, you know, his brother's not the be all end all of being a grown up, because his brother's the only, you know, role model he has. But once he starts to get to know the Nicole Smith character and all the other guys, you know, he starts to see other, you know, other differing opinions on what it's like to grow up, and he's able to kind of hone in on who he is as an individual, why he's different, where he's different from all these other guys, you know, and who he is as a person. Now he gravitates towards, especially kind of in the middle of the movie, gravitates towards alcohol and gravitates towards an escape, well, and weed, I guess, too, but gravitates towards an escape of his situation. And that's I think that's dealt with really well too. You have, you know, they have an understanding of, you know, what alcohol can do, and you know, they have it has an attractiveness to them, but you get to see by the end of the movie what kind of consequences there can be, and really how you need to, if you want to play with grown-up things, you need to be a grown-up. And so you can't really have it. It's really hard to have it both ways. So I think that Jonah Hill's responsible with that, and with showing a really young kid. I mean, that kid, he's, like you said, he's like 11 or 12, and he's just like down in 40-ounce beers. I mean, it is a serious issue.
What I find interesting is what I was just tapping into before. You think that choice is going to be, I'm going to drink until I puke, I'm going to drink until I pass out, I'm going to drink until somebody hurts me, or something bad's going to happen. But then the voice of reason shows up, and that's what I'm calling Ray, Nikhil Smith's character. He's the voice of reason. He sees it. Yes, the kid's young. He wants to fool around with girls. He wants to smoke weed. He wants to drink. I personally would not be comfortable, even at that age, to have that young of a kid around me doing those kind of things. But that's me. But those kids are going to find a way to do those anyway. You don't often see in movies where there's scenarios where they're hanging out and they're drinking and somebody becomes a rational human being and says, you're good. And he takes that 40 away from him and he says, he looks him dead in the eye and he says, you're good. Like, you're done. You've had enough, and somebody needs to stop you from what you're doing. Yes, most people in this world would say, well, you shouldn't have allowed the kid to be drinking to begin with. But for me, I understand that's part of the culture and all that other stuff. I see why you would allow that. But to have an actual character come in and say, that's enough, I've not seen that before in these type of coming of age films. I've not seen a responsible young kid actually be the voice of reason, and he is throughout the whole entire film. And actually, Ray's character, you can see, is going to progress into something other than just street skater. He's going to progress into professional skater. One, he's got the skills, and two, he has befriended all of these people who are professionals that come to these skate parks and hang out, and he's cool with all them. And that's done in a really interesting way where his friend is not cool around these professional skaters, and it shows the conflict between those two friends and the juxtaposed position of those two friends. One is growing up a lot quicker than the other one, but that other character, who we can't say his name on our podcast,
We'll just say FS.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'd rather not say anything at all because his name is great. I want to say it. And I think it's great because it sounds so much like a name after you hear it a bunch of times in the film that you no longer think of those words. Anyway, that character simply says, I'm good with being average. My parents are all about be this, be smart. I get all C's. I'm good. I'm passing. I've done the average amount of work. I think I'm okay. He has no more ambition other than...
That's a defense. That's a defensive position.
It is a defensive position, but I actually believe...
And he's scared.
He's scared, but I actually believe he's okay with just being a C average student, that he feels no pressure to try to do better. Remember when fourth grade was talking about, the character fourth grade was talking about, he'll probably just go to work with his dad in the factory. I forget what he says his dad did, but he really wants to be a filmmaker. And only he can see that he could be a filmmaker. Nobody else can see it until the end of the film, obviously. And the whole world who's watching it does not see him as a filmmaker. They just see him as a kid with a camera. But I actually think he thinks he could be a filmmaker. So when he says, I'll just probably go to work with my dad in the factory, I don't believe he believes that. But I believe if Olin, FS, says that same thing, he would be okay with just going to the factory every day and doing warehouse and doing what his father does. He has no ambitions other than just surviving and getting along. That's what I was trying to say. When he goes over to those professional skaters, I think he's not jealous of his friend. I think he's afraid of losing his friend, knowing that his friend could achieve more. He's not jealous of that. He's jealous of the fact that his friend can achieve more, and by achieving more, develop other and stronger and bigger friendships, if you will, or more important friendships, for lack of a better term. I think he's scared of that. And when he goes over there, he is not acting stupid because, or not stupid, but socially awkward. He's not acting like that because he's jealous or he's trying to fit in. He just doesn't know how to talk to people who are as famous as those people are. He is overwhelmed by those people being famous. So the goofy stuff that he does with his friends that plays as funny and works with the conversations with his friends do not work with this next level of friendship that Ray is trying to accomplish. So do I think that Olin wants anything more? No, I think he's happy with the status quo. I think he's happy with what's happening. And I think he's okay with that. And what I find interesting about that is most characters that are written like that in movies do want more and do see the difference and know they will never accomplish it because they just don't have the talent or they don't have the will or they don't have the skill to accomplish that. He doesn't. He just is fine with what he's got. And I think that is good. I think that's a good thing to show. Yes, this is the character who ultimately spins out of control and causes a major thing at the end of the film. Yes, that is that character. But honestly, it could have been any one of them that made those choices that caused that situation at the end.
I did want to talk about the Ruben character who is, we've talked about it a little bit, but is kind of like he's kind of trying to show Stevie the ropes, but ultimately gets jealous of Stevie because it seems like at one point the Ruben character was the new guy and the one who everybody was interested in, and and he's in a lot of ways has been supplanted by Stevie. So we get to see kind of that relationship where it kind of starts off as like, let me take you under my wing. I'm obviously a lot more mature than you are, and I'll help you out and I'll give you these, ground rules. But ultimately, like you said, Stevie, instead of just falling in line and not questioning things, he ends up either talking with Ray about things or the other characters about things, and they're able to kind of give him help him to understand, quote unquote real world, or, a more responsible and a grown up way of thinking about things. There's a difference between kind of like this hierarchy of, whatever, you have to pay your dues, all that stuff. And, we're all here together, and we're all, in this family. And it seems like the Ruben character is holding that, is looking at Stevie in a kind of definitely in a critical way, and in kind of like a jealous way. It's like, I used to be the shiny new toy, and now you are. So, that's every character. You don't just have kind of token characters. Every character has their own kind of, bent, has their own focus, and none of them are wasted, even though we're definitely more focused on the Stevie character. And you brought up the his self-harm in the past. I think the things that he uses to hurt himself are also important, and they're kind of specific things. When he goes to steal the money, and Lucas Hedges brings him in there and is like, all right, we're in it together, you steal this money, and he uses his mom's brush, which is probably something that she uses very often. That's a really personal thing. And then also he uses the Super Nintendo controller. He's not just using a random thing. He's using something. I mean, this is a thing that he uses all the time. This is a thing that is, I'm sure it's very important to him. But once again, he's trying to. It seems like he's trying to. I don't suffer from this. I don't feel like I have to, physically harm myself, or have that kind of a mental thing, to where I feel like I need to manifest emotions physically, which I'm very, very lucky for. But I can, at the very least, sympathize to someone who feels like they have to do that. And it's got to be some sort of, I don't know, some sort of like reckoning, I guess, like a mental reckoning of, this is a way to feel these emotions. And it's just amazing that some, first of all, from the character standpoint, that somebody can be affected in that way at such an early age. And that's crazy. I don't know if that would be like a learned behavior, if he saw it maybe when he was younger, if the character saw it when he was younger, or what, or if it was just a natural thing for that kid. But I mean, like at 11 or 12 years old, it's just insane that a kid that young would have to even be at a point where emotionally they would have to go through that. But secondly, from an acting standpoint, it's got to be crazy to ask someone to do that, number one. And number two, for it to seem so convincing, because to me, it did seem very convincing to me. So,
yeah, I was thinking about that too.
It started getting into a weird thing, especially with the controller thing, where he was like trying to choke himself. I was like, this kid's too young. He shouldn't have to be doing this. Like that's what I felt, after a certain point. Kind of goes back to when we, I don't know, years ago, I guess, when we talked about Under the Skin. Ugh, and the little kid,
the baby,
yeah. And that baby has no idea what's going on. There's no way to give that baby any kind of context. And whatever they did to make that kid scream, it had to be horrible. But at least in this, you can kind of explain it to Sonny Sulchick, but I don't know. I mean, that's gotta be tough. But it was definitely convincing to me, and I mean, it was effective. So I mean, that's something. But throughout this, he's also breaking down his perception of his brother. We get one other scene, well, and also his perception of maybe now's a good time to start talking about his relationship with girls or women, whatever you want to call it, because like what he sees is what his mom has shown him in his family life. And we only get like one little kind of like glimpse of what his family life is like, and what an older man, the only older man we see in the movie is a guy coming out of his mom's bedroom one morning when he's getting ready or whatever. And interestingly enough, that guy is Harmony Korine, who wrote Kids.
Oh, no way.
So him and Jonah Hill are friends, yeah.
Oh, can you even believe it? Like, what?
Yeah.
I actually think that is Sonny Sulcic's best acting in the film. That's
Really?
his best moment in the film. If and when you ever watch it again, watch how it's beyond awkward for all of the reasons you could possibly imagine, but he doesn't know to go left, doesn't know to go right, he doesn't know who this guy is. It's amazing what that little kid does in just that one sequence. I think everybody is focused on the guy coming out of the door. I actually focused on Stevie. I don't know why, I just did. Maybe some kind of denial. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to, put myself in that situation. I've never been in that situation. I don't want to deal with it, but I focused on him, and it is just it's the best moment in the film, in my opinion.
Really?
If you're going to break down, I'm talking about intimate moments of acting where little things like the way somebody brushes their forehead in with their hand in a movie can affect me because it's a choice normally. Sometimes those choices are made purposefully, and we've talked about this before in the past, and sometimes those choices just come because you're so ingrained in what the character's doing, you just kind of go on autopilot and your body does things and it just works out. And that's the best thing you can do instead of preordain a moment. Sometimes you have to, and sometimes you have to make that moment work because the director wants you to do certain things. And funny enough, for me, the opposite is true. If you tell me what to do, I will figure out the organic moment through what you just told me to do. They actually allow my body to do what it's supposed to do based on the character. Sometimes I'm really wonky on. So for that purpose, that moment is really well done. It's just crazy that it's the director of Kids.
Well, no, it's the writer of Kids. It was the writer of Kids. He's directed a lot of stuff. I mean,
even worse if you think about it.
It came from his brain.
Yeah, that's my point. Yeah. So maybe that's what Stevie was having a reaction to. I saw what you did to them kids in that movie. Let me get out of your way. It has nothing to do with you sleeping with my mother for a one-night stand or whatever. You're that guy who wrote that movie Kids. I don't want to be in that movie. Thank you, Jonah Hill.
So we see him. That's really the only adult interaction we see when it relates to any kind of sexual activity or sexual relation. And then as far as he's concerned, there's that great scene that when they started playing the music, which we'll have to talk about the music at some point, but specifically I'll talk about that song during the house party, which is Watermelon Man. It's a newer version of Watermelon Man by Herbie Hancock. He's a jazz piano player who started off with Miles Davis and then kind of did his own thing, but then got really heavy into synthesizers and kind of pushing 70s. I mean, it's a famous album. It's from I think it's from the Headhunters album, but it's a big song.
Yeah, the bodies in the video. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I don't know if I've seen the videos, but I definitely listened to it a lot when I was in jazz band and just when I was doing deep dives into jazz music. And it was a cool kind of refresher for me just to hear that song again. But we get to see, and I also like the way that scene is cut, how kind of you're seeing different, shots, and it's just kind of cut to the music. I really do like that, and it just kind of shows the flow of a party where people are moving around and standing and talking in different groups, small groups, and kind of going around and around. But then ultimately we get this super intense scene between between Stevie and the actress. I think her name is, is that her? Alexa Demie?
Yeah, that's her.
Yeah, that's her. So in that, the way that that's done, there's that kind of your heart's pounding type of a thing. And I definitely got that during that scene where you're nervous for him. And then it kind of goes from it switches fairly quickly into this oh, I'm in way over my head. And then she is able to, kind of be, she's able to be a comforting thing for him. And I mean, it says a lot about, I don't know, I guess it says a lot about our society's, view of sex. But the fact that and Jonah Hill even talks about this in some of the interviews I hear him in. He says that like the Stevie character doesn't even like internalize, doesn't even understand the value, the social value of what happened until until his friends, reflect on it with him. Like there's like a social cachet associated with, sexual interactions with, like, oh, you got with her, or whatever it is, you did this, you did that. And he doesn't even realize it in the moment, which separates. I think it does a good job of separating the intimate interaction between two people and the social implications of a sexual interaction. How they're two separate things, especially for young people. And so the intimacy that is shown in that interaction is totally different and has a totally different meaning than when he walks outside and the guys are like, "Oh, how was it, man? You're awesome." They're two separate things, even though they're based on the same event, I guess, but they're still two separate things. And I guess it hasn't been that specifically laid out for me in a movie before. And I thought it was new and interesting, and it does help for me, at least. That's what I got out of it, to differentiate between those two things.
This is just going to solidify what I was talking about earlier. There is a pattern in this film where you're setting something up and then the outcome becomes something unexpected. I'm not expecting fourth grade to bring up the weirdest conversation that men can talk about, or young men can talk about, and then talk about his feelings after. I'm not expecting that. I'm not expecting for a young skater to actually be the voice of reason and take a 40 away from a kid in a movie like this. I'm not expecting that kind of stuff. So it's refreshing. And when that girl when she says, young lady, when she says, want to go back to so-and-so's bedroom, I'm like, ew, he's like a little kid.
He's a lot younger
like
than
the
she
fourth
is.
or fifth grade. I mean, he's what, fifth grade? I mean, would you walk into a fifth grader's classroom and try to feel them up when you're that age? No. What are you doing? He's a little boy. And then I realized that, there are people who make the movie kids. So things like this happen. Okay. So when they go back to the bedroom and they're kind of kissing, and she said there's no reason to be nervous, it's kind of delicate. And I was like, okay, I like the way that this is being played out, but still, it's so gross. Then after the interaction happens and he comes outside, what I wasn't expecting was the fact that he just kind of went to second base or third base, whatever it's considered nowadays, right? Which is what 13 and 14-year-old kids do. And so I was okay with that. And they did a little kissing and they did a little petting and a little bit more than that, which I specifically remember two guys in the 8th grade having that same experience with their girlfriends over the summer and talking about it, but they were talking about it differently than most people talk about it. And I have not seen that in a movie where the same thing happened in real life happens in the movie. So when Stevie comes outside, he doesn't brag to them what he did. He's almost in awe, like, she touched it and I got to do this and I can't believe that just happened to me. What just happened? Yeah. It's almost as innocent as something like that could be described. And these two guys that I remember hearing their conversation with, as actually part of the conversation, although none of that was happening to me. Thank God. But the way that they were saying it was like, did this happen to you? Yeah, that happened. That's weird, right? Yeah, is that supposed to happen? Yeah, I think that's supposed to happen. Wow, I can't believe that we actually did. It was about sexual discovery, not about sexual conquest. And in these type of movies, it's usually about sexual conquest. So the fact that Stevie came out older, more experienced, but yet still had this innocence about him. And then the guys were like, yeah, what happened? You're the man. They don't egg him on to describe anything. They don't say, disgusting misogynistic things that you traditionally get in a conversation like this in this type of film. And I was like, okay, I have registered all these other moments up to this point, but that solidified that motif for me. I was like, Jonah Hill is doing what his character in Superbad did. His character in Superbad wanted to accomplish getting liquor so he could possibly get with Emma Stone later on. But he has this integrity and this innocence about him. And that scene when they're, he boops his nose and they're having the sleepover and stuff like that, there is a genuine love between those guys. You don't see those types of subjects pushed together in films. So it was refreshing when Stevie came out of this crazy, awkward moment. And actually, it was more of a sharing of what happened versus look what I did type of thing. So I was thankful because there are going to be kids out there who are Stevie's age who are going to see this movie, and it's going to help them get through those situations in their life. They're going to be in those situations. They're going to have to somehow start these experiences. And if you don't have friends or family members, because you don't want to talk to your family members about this. I don't care how cool your parents are. You do not want to talk to them about it. You just don't. No. That's why I'm glad I'm the uncle, because it's easy to talk to me to a degree. But still, it's weird for the person to listen to it too. But the point is that there's going to be nobody to listen to so-and-so in Kansas, young Johnny in Kansas. And he's going to have his first experience, and he's not going to know what to do. And he's probably going to be surrounded by guys who act like these guys don't act. Then he'll pop in this movie one night because it's about skaters, and this moment's going to hit him where he goes, oh, this is normal. This is okay. And everybody's cool with it. And so I was happy that Jonah Hill had the integrity and the heart to put it in there. Kind of, at the end of the movie, I teared up a little bit, not because the movie is an emotionally tearful movie at the end or moment at the end. It's because I think he handled it with such integrity and such honesty that I actually think he's done good for the world by making this film. I know that's like making it bigger than what it is. It's just a movie about skaters. I get that. But I'm telling you, this age frame, there are not people listening to these kids. They're not. And you have to find some way to relate. That's what starts this whole movie off. He needed to find something to relate to. His older brother was beating the hell out of him at the beginning of the film. His mother takes his brother out on his 18th birthday and talks about how she was nursing a baby at that age and how men are this and how she didn't want to do this and how she did. I mean, who wants to have that conversation with your mom? I don't want to hear it. So he has nobody to relate to. And I'm telling you, that kid Johnny in Kansas is going to flip this movie on one night and everything will be better because of it. I know that's a little too deep and a little too thought-provoking for a skaters movie, but I think Jonah Hill accomplished it. I'm going to backtrack real quick for just a second. The whole self-mutilating thing, my understanding is that self-mutilation is a way of relieving the stress through pain. That the physical pain takes the emotional pain away, at least for that moment. That's why people continuously do that. So that's psychologically why a lot of people do that. Second of all, I did register, that must have been hard to do as an actor with that brush, because how do you do that over and over again? Because he really looks like he was doing it. So I was thinking, as I was driving home, did he have his fingers up underneath the brush when he was rubbing it? It wasn't really pushing on the bristles as hard. I think that's a one-take shot. Because the way he gets ready to take his pants down to use his leg in that scene is a little awkward and doesn't seem as natural as it could have been. Which is good because it made it look real. So I'm wondering if they just did it in one shot and actually allowed him to rub his leg, because you couldn't do that more than 2 or 3 times without really hurting yourself. Yeah. So I'm sure they didn't ask him to do that. I'm not sure, but I'm thinking it's one take to do that. And really quick, going back to the conversation we had about the Ruben character and FS and Ray and Stevie, we were talking about how the ambitions of these characters, FS is just good with the average going. Ray wants more. Stevie wants more. It's almost if Ruben and FS are the same characters, just 5 or 6 years apart. Because Ruben, he doesn't really care. He's the kid who doesn't go to his house. He's the kid who befriends Stevie to begin with. And I think he wants a friend who he can kind of like master and get the best of. But what happens is Stevie's just a genuine person and just does the things that he's supposed to do with joy. He's happy about going and getting a gallon of water. He does, yeah, sure, I'll do that. He's not taking that as like a challenge or a what's the word? An initiation. None of that stuff. So it's almost like Ray and Stevie are the same character, just a couple years apart, and Ruben and FS are the same characters, and they're going to end up in the same place. I know we backtracked way further than we probably could, but I thought that was an interesting way to write characters. You write two characters that are alike, one older, one younger, and two other characters that are alike, two that are going to accomplish something in this world, and other ones that are just going to go with the status quo. And then there's fourth grade, where you know in the back of your head when you see the end of this film that he is actually going to become a successful filmmaker. You just have this sense because he loves it that much. I didn't mean to backtrack too far, but I just thought it was important, those aspects that we talked about. So now we could jump back to after the sex scene.
Well, yeah, I did want to bring up kind of like once Stevie gets in trouble and his mom is starting to realize that he is, how he has changed by being around these guys, and she only sees the negative things, obviously. So she brings him in the ultimate betrayal of coolness, brings him in and berates the other skater kids. And then after that whole scene of her kind of confronting him and saying, you don't need to have anything to do with my son anymore. And they get back in the car. I mean, like that scene, that's when he kind of goes off on his mom is, that's a rough scene. And I think for me, that's the scene that kind of gets him to stretch a lot. And you really see, what he can do as an actor. And he's not just like at least I recognize that he's not just like a skater who is saying lines. I mean, his whole like body chemistry changes when he, starts yelling at his mom. And I mean, like, it's also a little, it's also, I've never yelled at my mom like that. So, I mean, I don't know. It's a little disturbing that, that he's doing that, but I'm not saying he's not justified in some of the things that he's saying. But yeah, I think that was a really affecting scene for me. And then similarly, he kind of has that same interaction with his brother where they're kind of like running around in the kitchen and stuff, and he pretty much just like loses. There is a loss of innocence in this movie, and his loss of innocence in a lot of ways is his realization that his, obviously his mom's, I don't think he ever thought his mom was perfect, but, his realization that, he needs to make his own way in life. I mean, that's tough as 11-year-old to have to go through that, but that he ultimately has to make his own way in life. And that also his brother may not be the person that he wants to be, or isn't the person that he wants to be. And he kind of, starts to poke at his brother and kind of like, hold a mirror up to his brother and show him the things that, the bad things that his brother's doing to him, and saying like, I'm not going to do this anymore. We're not going to have this relationship anymore. And that really hits Lucas Hedges hard.
As for the scene where he's yelling at his mother, what that showed to me was that she has not had control over her kid for a long time, because you're absolutely right. Even at that age, you knew you couldn't speak to your mother that way, because your mother had taught you that would never be acceptable behavior on any level whatsoever. And you can see her giving in, because she has no way of stopping him when he's screaming, "Shut the F up, shut up, shut up, shut up." She and he realizes that's it. She has no way of disciplining him at this point. None. She hasn't had that control over him for a long time, if you want to call it control, because she never instilled that to begin with. And I think she realizes that.
She's trying to like catch up on mothering at that moment.
She's realizing that not only is she not going to catch up, but she's at a deficit.
Yeah.
And that her kid is going to do whatever he wants to do at this point because the rock of the relationship is not in place. It's not on steady ground. And you're right, he does show his acting chops in that scene. He is really good. I also think he shows it in other scenes too. I think there are lighter moments that are hard to pull off. And I've said this before, as an actor, those smaller moments are harder for me. And I'm not saying that's it for everybody, but for me, those smaller moments, those genuine reaction moments where you're just like tickled by somebody, you have a little smile on your face, those are harder to recreate for me than these big emotional moments, because once you're in those moments, you just let yourself go, whether or not it's a screaming or whatever. I often refer to the play that I did, Perfect Arrangement, but when I got to get to the last scene where I was yelling and screaming at people, I'm good. Like, I used to take the stage like bombastically at that point. Up to that point, I was always a little not steady, and a lot of those moments were laughable, loving moments. They were way more awkward to pull off than the whole pointing the finger and yelling at somebody thing. Don't you tell me type of moments. Those are harder. Those small moments are harder. So I actually think that Stevie as a character showed those acting chops in different things in the beginning of the film. But you're absolutely right. He does prove that he is something special in that moment. Then to the Lucas Hedges moment, and we'll get to the big screaming moment because I know what you're going to say about it. I do know what you're going to say about it because when it happened, I went, Josh is going to hate that.
Mm-hmm.
Josh is going to he's going to have something to say about this moment. And I felt it. I know exactly what you're talking about. What happened for me at that moment was not only does Stevie realize that his brother is never going to be the person who leads him or shows him or takes care of him. Actually, the Ray character is the substitute for his brother. And somebody once told me a long time ago, and they were a God believer and a Christian, and they said that God would put a person in your life to help with a person who was a deficit. So if you had issues with a father, then God would put a father figure in your life that you could access that person. It doesn't matter that she believed in God and that she believed God set those people into your life. Those people do come into your life. You might not have a uncle, you might not have a sister, you might not have a mother, but somebody comes in and represents for that. And when Ray takes Stevie skating and they skate just themselves together, that's everything that he wants in his brother's relationship with Lucas Hedges and is never going to get. He wants his brother to show him how to clean his tennis shoes and how to listen, what to listen to and all that other stuff. But his brother does the polar opposite. The brother has obviously a deficit in emotional reactions to people, or he wouldn't say, you listen to music anyway, when he wanted his iPod. So that person is going to become representative at some point in your life. And Ray does that for him. As for that scene between them at the end, he grabs the orange juice out of the refrigerator, first of all, which I thought was, I was right. There is something about this orange juice. And then later on, there is something else.
Yeah.
It's not about Stevie coming to terms with their relationship. It's about Lucas Hedges' reaction to their relationship. He knows at that point he's done. Just like Catherine Waterston knows at that point she no longer can discipline him on a certain level. And Ian is Lucas Hedges' character's name. He knows at that point he no longer has any form of control over his brother. And I thought it was well handled, because if you're not analyzing this film as you're going along, you're not going to pick up on those things. And some people might say there's nothing that happened in this movie. It was kind of boring. No, it's all there. The storytelling process is all there. And he does it with these small moments, which these two moments are larger than most of the moments in the film. And he also does it with these motifs with the orange juice and so forth and so on. And I think that's good storytelling. So now let's get to the primal scream.
Well, I don't even have to say anything. I mean, we're done.
Here's what you're going to say. You're going to say that it started off okay, and then he took it to a place where it became unrealistic for you and ruined the whole moment for you.
Well, you don't even need me here. You can do the whole podcast, both sides.
No, I need you here because I cannot pronounce these people's names. Other than that, yeah, I probably no. I'm just kidding. I often think you could probably do the podcast by yourself a lot better than I could do it by myself. But that's neither here nor there. No, here's why I know that. One, I've known you for 5 years when it comes to movie watching experiences. How you would react in your personal life, I could guess, having dinner with you and your wife and hanging out with you. But usually when you and I hang out, it's for a purpose. We go to dinner, we do the podcast. We go to a movie, we watch the Oscars. It's never just like Josh and Paul hanging out. I mean, we've never done that, okay? Even from the beginning of our relationship, when you stayed at the hotel where I worked, it wasn't about hanging out. It was about what's your top 10 movies of all time. You know, we did movie list. Mm-hmm. So there was always an intention behind why we were hanging out. So you socially, I don't know how you would react. How you react to movies, I can sense it now. And here's another reason why. I would tend to agree with you that moment is exaggerated too far. And that whole thing thing he does in the middle of it, it's too far. You can tell the actor is trying to wring the moment out versus allow the moment to just happen. For me personally, though, as an actor, if that came out of me and that's what I expressed, I'd be proud of myself. I was okay with the moment, but I knew you were going to have issues with it.
Well, wait a second. You just said it was too far, but then you said you said you liked it. Or you didn't like it, but you didn't say you liked it. You just said it would be too far, but if it happened, if you did that, it would be genuine. So the only person who can know if it's genuine is Lucas Hedges, I guess.
Okay, I would hope it would be genuine. I'm not saying it would be genuine. I'm not saying that I could do that moment better than him. I'm saying that as an actor, there's this instinct to just push it to what we've called the logical absurdity before, where you just go so far over the top with something and the director has all of this to work with, and then he can start cutting it back. And, I just worked with a director who was like, no, Paul, don't do that. Paul, that thing you just did, don't do that. A lot, okay? Like 90% of the things that I chose to do, he's like, no. And he's really nice about it, though. He's like, I see where you're going. Don't do that. And so it became a joke where I'd be like, Paul, don't do that before you'd even speak. Now, the 10% of choices that I made, I was proud of. And there were a few things that stuck that became moments in the play that I created with the other actor. And so I was proud of that. But he said consistently, don't ever be embarrassed by that, because I would rather have 1,000 bad choices versus no choices at all. I would prefer to say, don't do that versus you're not doing anything. You're not doing anything. I could tell you don't do that until you figure out what to do versus tell you to do that until you figure out what to do. So I was like, okay, well, that was a good save because, he told me a lot. There were a lot. He was like, one time he went, good choice, don't do that.
That being said, I think that's why films are a director's medium. And like you said, maybe they did 20 takes of that, and that was just one take that he decided to do that. And Jonah Hill decided that's the take I want in the movie. I bring this up all the time. We talk about Dr. Strangelove and how Kubrick wanted the Buck Turgidson character, George C. Scott, he refused to act in this buffoonish way. And then Kubrick was finally like, just do it once for me. Just do each of these scenes once in the craziness, and then you can do the rest of them, in a more measured way. The movie is littered with those crazy takes. It's pretty much like every single crazy take that he did is in the movie. And so that's that character. And that's why it's Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove and not George C. Scott's Dr. Strangelove. Hopefully was okay with it, but still.
Well, too bad. Well, I guess that's what you sign up for. You sign up for trusting a director to say, yeah, that was a good choice, but not for this. Don't do that. You sign up for that, and it crushes you a little bit at the moment because you're thinking if it's a premeditated choice, it never really works. Usually a choice that you just make in the moment usually sticks because it's genuine and it's organic. Now, to recreate that over and over again is the plight of the theater actor, if you will. It's hard to do. But once those moments usually lock in, they usually play the same way every night because they're genuine. I'm surprised George C. Scott was not nominated for the Oscar for that film because he is outrageously funny and great and scary all at the same time because of what Kubrick gave him permission to do, whether or not he wanted to do it or not. Kevin Kline on A Fish Called Wanda saw the premiere and said, "I'll never work again. That is the most over-the-top piece of crap thing I've ever done in my life. I'm mortified. I'm a Shakespearean theatrical actor. I'm a thespian. I will never work again." And he won the Oscar. And it's one of those roles that people imitate to this day. And it is one of those roles that when you watch, if you don't know anything, you go, he should have won the Oscar for that. He did. So you never know. Back to the Lucas Hedges moment. It's interesting to me that you brought up Jonah Hill because obviously he chose that moment to be the moment that you see in the film. I actually think this is the one moment that Jonah Hill missed, not because of the choice Lucas Hedges made, but because of the choice Jonah Hill made. If Jonah Hill had continued the camera down the hallway past Luke after the first thing happened, if the camera continuously went past Lucas Hedges and then you heard that strange guttural thing that really ruins that moment, I guess for you, and I can see why it did. If the camera was not faced on him, it would have been heart-wrenching to hear that moment off screen. So I actually think that's Jonah Hill's choice that doesn't work completely. I see why he chose it, and on the day that it happened, it probably felt incredible, and he probably knew that that would be the choice, but it's almost like if you hear somebody cry, you feel more sympathetic to them than seeing them actually cry. Or if you see somebody holding back tears, it's much more heartfelt for somebody watching that than seeing somebody boo-hoo. There's some kind of strange, like, once an emotion gets into what they call ugly cry, it's almost hard for a person watching that. Maybe your psyche can't take that in, so you're not emotionally affected by it and become distraught too. I don't know what that mechanism is. It does feel strange and awkward, not because of the societal standard about men don't cry or any of that crap, because I don't buy into that at all, because every guy I know who has ever had any integrity in my eyes all admit to crying and all cry on a regular basis and have cried in front of me watching plays or whatever. Gay, straight, in between, blue, white, whatever. They all have an emotional center where they're like, yeah, I have emotions. I'm not going to not use my emotions. I'm not getting trapped into that. Good luck with that. So I think what happened was it just was one of those intense moments that maybe we should not have seen face forward all the way the whole moment. If the camera had gone past him, it might have worked. And I'm literally just now thinking that up as we're speaking. It would have been heard, not seen, because you already saw what you needed to see with Lucas Hedges putting the t-shirt over his head and fighting himself and all that other stuff. You already seen it. So there's no need to see it anymore after a couple of seconds. To go past it, you would be feeling it, and it might have worked better for you.
Yeah.
Don't you love how I redirect people's professional projects? Like, I know what I'm talking about. Like, I'm firmly convinced after I just said that I'm right. What? Like, I have no idea what the right choice is, but that's what feels right to talk about.
Well, no, I mean, and actually just you talking about that, it would have been a real interesting thing to have that camera like on the move down the hall and even like on Stevie when he hears that, you know, and like
or the back of Stevie as he goes around the corner again, or upstairs or wherever he could go, or out the front door. It's a little too on the nose, but
yeah, but even Stevie hearing that and then like, you know, making a quick like, because it's a malicious thing that he does. I mean, he's really taking his brother down a peg. You know, he's saying like, you thought that I thought you were cool, and I used to think you were cool. Now I don't even care about you. Like, now I know what your thing was. I know what you were doing to me, and I reject that. And so it would have been interesting for him, you know, for that probably would have complicated things a lot more. But you know, being able to, you know, at least seeing his reaction to like his brother being a blubbering, like wreck on the floor in another room. Like seeing that reaction would have been interesting, but that's just a really complex switch for the Stevie character if they did that. But still, like I said, or like you said, being down the hall and just hearing it, off camera, that would have been really, really affecting. Let's talk about the very end. The I thought that the decision to get into to the car at the end was interesting. I don't know. I thought that part to me was a little bit more. You're kind of like barreling towards something happening by the end, but the fact that they all kind of like looked to Ray to give the go ahead to get in the car, even though they all knew that FS was completely blitzed. I don't know. I don't know if that's like I mean, obviously it's not something that is a, direct correlation of like, hey, if you're in a group of friends and you're all really drunk, you need to get in the car together. I don't think it's that. But I think it's like one of those like, I don't know if it's like a family, like, hey, we're all in this together. We need to, be in it together. But I mean, it could ultimately just come down to the fact that it's like, these are kids. They're making bad decisions. At this moment, this bad decision that they make will affect them all. And that's what ends up happening. Could have been a lot worse, but that they got lucky. So the other thing about that scene is that you're right. You said it earlier, where once they're all in the hospital and waiting outside to make sure Stevie's okay, that's when Catherine Waterston realizes that they are his surrogate family because she hasn't been enough and his brother hasn't been enough for him, for Stevie. So these guys have been his surrogate family. And then the other interesting thing that I did want to bring up about the end, and you can kind of give me your take on the end, is that Jonah Hill seems to think that moment at the end, like right at the end when fourth grade puts in the tape, that's kind of like the end of their story as a group. Like that's the moment, according to Jonah Hill, that's the moment where they all kind of are going to move on. Whether it's Ray going on to, to pursue a career in skating and fourth grade kind of like going, maybe getting deeper into filmmaking and everybody just kind of like going off into their own ways and maybe coming back and still being friends and stuff, but he sees that as kind of like the demarcation point. This is the event where everybody's still together, but at the same time, like it's kind of like the grown up event. Like these are the things that they're doing have serious implications, and they're all going to kind of like grow up a lot quicker since this incident happened.
Okay, so the moment of looking to Ray and getting in the car, I think it harkens back to what we were talking about earlier, that there's peer pressure in this age group. And luckily, Ray, in the right situation, is the voice of reason and says, you've had enough of that 40. You're good. Continue on. Stop drinking. I got your back. I'm not going to let this get out of control. I think that it's smart that Jonah Hill says that scene and that video is proof that they are moving on, because sometimes in relationships it gets bad before it gets worse, before it gets better. And mostly it gets bad, then it gets worse, and then you separate. So in all relationships, if it goes bad, you usually separate. And I think that's just the moment where Ray says, I don't really have a rebuttal for this, because this is going to be a much bigger thing if I don't just go along with it than if I try to be the responsible one. And actually, Ray is never the responsible one to the group. He's responsible to the individual. And he's probably done those moments with fourth grade. He's probably had those moments with
Ruben.
Oh, God, what's his name? Ruben. Yeah. And he's probably had those kind of older brother scenes or sequences or moments with the other characters. So for him to actually dictate what the group does is never a dynamic that you see in the movie. So it's not expected that he would do that. And also, what I find interesting about this film is Jonah Hill really thought about this with all the motifs like the orange juice and how anal retentive the brother is. It gives these colors to the characters that you are never spoken about. You don't talk about them. They're just there. And he mirrors that scene close to the middle of the film where they're all driving around the car and Stevie says, I've never been in a car without a parent driving. And it's sort of kind of like one more naive thing that he's revealing to Ruben that he's never gone through before. And Ruben, of course, says, don't say that, blah, blah, blah. Hey, by the way, side note, did you notice that a couple of the characters throughout the film were wearing T-shirts with female symbols of a bathroom symbol, like woman's room or men's room? They were wearing those like, you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't remember that, though.
Yeah. I don't know why it's there. I believe it's Ruben in that scene is wearing that T-shirt that has that symbol on it. And then Ray later on after Stevie gets into after the car accident. And they're sitting in the back of the store. No, not after the car, after the fight sequence with Ruben and Stevie. When Ray comes around the corner, he's wearing a very atypical 90s looking like baseball T-shirt with that symbol on it. I have no idea if that means anything, but that symbol has been repeated throughout the film. But that is proof that Jonah Hill, as a filmmaker and writer, is thinking about the things. So when they all decide to get into the car, nothing happened in the mirror scene. Everything was fine. They just had a good time. They went to a party. Everything was great. And by the way, side note, that party sequence is going to be, the way that that's edited and the way that that was filmed is going to be Jonah Hill's signature if he makes more films in the future. That's extremely well done. Because I've seen that done before where you jump from moment to moment, hours to hours, but I've never seen it where the whole crowd is moved to the table, then moved over to the sink, and then moved over. I've never seen it quite like that. It's very well done. Those pictures are set up for you to know exactly what's happening in those moments in that just snippet party sequence. I just had to make note of that. So I don't know if it's just blatant peer pressure, but there has to be a way to get all of them into the car. I think it's more telling that the young kids or the younger ones want to still be influenced by somebody who has some form of authority. That's actually a good sign. That means that those young guys have empathy and they have some kind of feeling towards the world other than just going along with the flow. They actually are looking at somebody who they're hoping will make a better decision. Unfortunately, he makes a bad choice and just gets in the car. But he's thinking to himself, nothing bad's going to happen. Of course, every single person watching the movie knows something bad is going to happen. And that's shot extremely well, too. I actually thought that Fourth Grade was going to die because the way that flashes on his face right before right after, well, I guess the accident, if you will, the whole crash moment is flashed on Fourth Grade's face and does that kind of like shutter stop motion thing and then stark white light. I thought for sure, oh no, they killed him. Oh, that sucks. I like that guy. But happily, he doesn't die. As for the moment when Catherine Waterston sees them in the hospital room or the hospital waiting room, I believe if she thinks this is his surrogate family, that might be a little too deep for a thought for a character who's living the moment. For me, it was more like, I misjudged these guys. Good people would wait around to see if their friend was okay. Not good people would never show up at the hospital. And she has this revelation that they're just good kids. They're just in circumstances beyond their control. And what's brilliant about that moment is right before that moment is a moment where Lucas Hedges kind of has a reckoning of for himself when he's seeing his hurt brother, that if he had taken care of his brother, he might not be in this situation. He might. Who knows? Kids do what they want to do. But Lucas Hedges has that moment where he's like, my brother is hurt. Because up to that moment, I was like, do they even like each other? Do they love each other as brothers? Obviously, Stevie does because he looks up to his older brother. But it looks like Lucas Hedges is sort of a sociopath up to that point. The whole like, steal the money with me so we could be in this together. But then Stevie trumps him later on and is like, nope, I didn't have a thing to do with it. And I know mom's going to believe me and she's not going to believe you. And if you weren't such a dickhead to me as a brother, maybe I would have had your back. And I think that's the moment that he starts to lose respect for his brother. And that's why Jonah Hill probably doesn't show Stevie at the big cry scene with Lucas Hedges, because he's already had that moment where he's like, yeah, I'm done with you. You have not been good for me. But Lucas Hedges has a reckoning, and it's brilliant how Jonah Hill shows that. He brings those two separate containers of juice out and opens one and gives it to Stevie, wakes him up and gives it to him. I thought that was lovely. I thought that was really well done. It was a way of telling the audience that these two kids, these two brothers, are going to be okay. And as a matter of fact, the younger brother has taught the older brother way more stuff.
Yep.
And Lucas Hedges has learned. And that's why when you see the mother character seeing all of the kids sleeping in the waiting room, she has a reckoning at that moment too. You can't judge a book by its cover. You never found out anything about these kids. Yes, you don't want your kids doing drugs. You don't want your kids drinking. You don't want them driving around with people drinking. Yes, you have to protect them. But the way she went about it was to not find out anything about those kids. And it's interesting. There was some kid in America. This is a real life story. And I think he's like in the 4th grade, and he was being bullied by this other kid in the 4th grade. And his dad went to school. And as you're hearing this story, you're thinking, oh, this is typical. Either the dad's going to go to the parents and bitch them out, or he's going to go to the kid and threaten the kid. You know what he did? He went and got that kid, went and asked the parents permission. We want to go out for pizza together. Started to talk to the little kid and started to find out this kid is basically homeless. He hardly ever eats before he comes to school. And it's not an excuse to be picking on somebody or bullying somebody, but there is a story behind the bully. And the father took time to listen to find out what that kid's story was. Now, not only has he helped his kid stop being bullied, but he's helped another kid, one, get meals in the morning, get materials for school. And now his friend has a buddy, and, you know, hopefully they live happily ever after. But the point is that you never take the time to find out what the other person you're judging is doing. And maybe if you took the time to find out if these skater kids are any good. First of all, they're working. They work at that skate shop, so they have jobs, you know, maybe not the most responsible people in the world, but they have jobs, so they have something of a quality that you want your son to imitate, at least later on in life. So just be careful, because you cannot judge a book by its cover. And I think that's so well handled in that moment. And the fact that all she says is, do you want to come back and see him, is great. There's no moment of her saying, I'm sorry I judged you. Nothing. It's all done on her face. She's beautiful. And I never realized who her father was until this movie. I had no idea. You know, her father's Sam Waterston, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Haven't we talked about that?
Okay. No, if we did, you know, sometimes I wonder about my brain, because I know we talk about it and then it doesn't stick, and then some things won't go away. But for whatever reason, I was like, wait, is she Sam Waterston's daughter? Yeah. And then you can see it. Like, her face is his face.
Well, and I saw it on Inherent Vice. That was the first time I really keyed into it. So, but we've talked about her a bunch.
Yeah,
we talked about her in Steve Jobs and Fantastic Beasts, and and
we're probably going to talk about her again, because Fantastic Beast is coming up again.
The Crimes of Grindelwald.
Yes.
All right. Well, the last thing I'm going to say is about the music, and I thought that the choices that he made were really cool. It was eclectic. I mean, once again, he's got Herbie Hancock in there. He's got Kiss from a Rose in there from Seal. He's got the Pixies, Mamas and the Papas. So yeah, I thought that the use of music, and I don't think there was score. And it was Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. They did a few pieces.
Yeah, I saw that.
So yeah, that's really, and I think they did that for free. Like, I think they were just kind of, because it's a really small budget movie, and they were like, yeah, this looks cool. We'll do it. You know, so that's really cool. You know, kind of getting there was some Morrissey song in there.
That was the skate sequence with Ray.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Mamas and the Papas was in another skate sequence. That was the bigger skate sequence with everybody down the same road, where they're kind of like the cars are on either side and they're in the turn lane.
Yeah. That's cool.
So I thought that was cool. But yeah, great use of music, and then sprinkled with a little bit of score. So I thought that was awesome.
I just have to say that congratulations to Jonah Hill, because I think he accomplished what he set out to accomplish.
Yeah.
He told an interesting story, a story that I've seen a million times before in a unique and different kind of way. It reminded me of watching a play, and that's always good for me. These little motifs that I've often talked about throughout the podcast, the patterns that he delved into, the character choices that he made that were subtle but yet there. I think he did a really good job. And I also think he stood out of the way of his own project. Sometimes I think directors are so heavy-handed with things that they have to prove themselves as a director. And usually first-time directing pieces have too much of a thumbprint and too much of a unique idea. And if they just tone it back and just tell the story, they'll be much better off. And I think he did a great job, and he should be applauded because it's a well-told story.
Yeah, I agree, and I hope that he gets another chance to make another movie. So, all right, well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer, and you can tweet us at actorengineer. We'll see you next time.